Hi there, my little reading friends. It's Kakuli here. It's story time. Today I'm going to tell you a fairy tale story of a teeny tiny girl called Thumbelina. Let's start. Once upon a time, a young woman wished to have a little girl. Finally, one day her wish came true. The beautiful little girl that she found between the petals of a flower was no taller than her thumb. So she named her Thumbelina and made cradle for her from a walnut shell. Thumbelina loved to walk in the garden, but she was barely as tall as the grass. One day, while she was enjoying the sunshine, a big, ugly frog stopped her. He had heard about Thumbelina's beauty and wanted to take her home with him to marry his son. But Thumbelina was very frightened. Though she tried to run away, the frog caught her and took her to the swamp where he lived. He placed Thumbelina on a big water lily pad in the middle of a nearby pond where he lived. Poor Thumbelina was very lonely and afraid. Small fish swimming in the pond heard Thumbelina crying and they came to help her. She was so tiny and helpless and so lovely that they felt sorry for her. Swimming under the leaf, they nibbled away the stem so that Thumbelina could float away from where the frogs lived. A beautiful butterfly was flying around. It offered to help her and flapped his wings so that Thumbelina could float farther away on a raft. Suddenly, a large beetle swooped down and carried Thumbelina to his tree. Thumbelina was frightened again, but the beetle was very kind to her. He brought her honey from the flowers. He saw that she has enough to eat and a safe place among the leaves of his tree. The beetle knew he couldn't keep Thumbelina forever, so one day he left her on a flower in the field. For the entire summer, Thumbelina was very happy. She lived among the flowers and sipped honey from them for food. She drank dew on the leaves and was warmed by the sun. Many tiny insects and small animals were her friends. But soon summer was over and autumn came. The sun was no longer warm. Small animals and insects disappeared. Even the flowers' petals and the leaves blew down from the trees. Thumbelina wrapped herself in a leaf to keep warm, but that leaf too withered and blew away. Thumbelina was frightened and lonely once again. She didn't know where to go for help at this time. She wandered through the fields and there she met a friendly mouse. He invited her for supper. He saw that she was cold and hungry, so he called her down into his den under a haystack. He and his friend, a mole who lived in a nearby hole, were very kind to Thumbelina. To repay them for their kindness, she kept house and cooked delicious meals for them. One day, while Thumbelina was there alone, she looked out and saw a poor swallow who seemed to be dead. And when he fluttered his wings, she brought him in before the fire, where he was soon warmed. He hadn't been really dead, just numb from the cold. Thumbelina cared for the bird and saw that he had enough to eat. Finally, when he was strong and well, he thanked her and flew away. The mole loved Thumbelina and wanted to marry her. He set a date for the wedding. She was very sad. Thumbelina didn't want to marry the mole for she thought that she would have to live underground in his tunnel forever. Instead, she wanted to go back to her garden to be warmed by the sun and to live among the beautiful flowers. The day before Thumbelina was to marry the mole, she stood at the door of the mouse's den, looking up at the clear blue sky. Just then she heard wings flapping. It was her friend the swallow. He asked her why she was so unhappy. Thumbelina told him her wish, and he offered to take her away. She climbed on his back, and they flew to a far off land where there were flowers and sunshine and many tiny creatures. The swallow placed Thumbelina on a beautiful white flower. It opened, and she was surprised to see a handsome prince not much larger than herself, with a gold crown on his head and delicate wings on his shoulders. When the prince saw Thumbelina's beauty and he asked her to marry him, he gave her a fine crown and a pair of white wings as wedding presents. And after they were married, Thumbelina and the prince lived among the flowers and were warmed by the sun. The garden was most beautiful Thumbelina had ever seen. There were many kind of flowers and blossoms and plants. With their delicate wings, the prince and his bride could fly from flowers to flower, sipping the honey. They enjoyed the singing of the birds, and they loved the garden very much. Their friend, the swallow, stayed to live near them in the garden. Thumbelina was no longer lonely. She and the prince loved this wonderful land and lived there happily forever and ever.